What's up? Welcome back to another edition of the Mandatory Live. Remember, if you like the content, hit that like and subscribe button. Also, follow us on our social media channels. We're at the Mandatory TKO. You can also hit that like and subscribe button because that's always going to help the channel grow. We're also on the audio side. So if you got a couple of minutes, leave a rate and review because that helps the channel grow as well. And if you've already done that, thank you so much. We do appreciate you. Of course, you all are friends of the show. And it was a crazy busy boxing weekend. Bryan and I did 2 lives, one on Friday, one on Saturday night. If you didn't see it, go check it out. We were like giving it our all this weekend in terms of keeping it real,
Yeah,
right? Like we
that's
were
true.
not holding back on those shows. So if you want to know what we thought about Fiddle Fury in Times Square and then also Canelo in School, make sure to go check out those lives because they're worth it. Because Cardenas was taking a lot of his power, a lot of it,
Yeah.
like Inoue had to break him down round by round,
Mm.
get those, liver shots and body shots in that ended up hurting Ramon Cardenas.
I know where you're
It took
going.
a while. Now, my question is we've been in a situation where we've talked about Inoue moving up and how his power would translate against a tough
Mm.
guy like Ramon Cardenas. He got dropped, but also Ramon Cardenas was eating a lot of his shots for a very long time. My question is to you, Bryan, after this fight with MJ, because that's already been confirmed. It's going down in September, I believe.
Yes. I think it's actually a couple days after Canelo Crawford.
That's crazy, which is good because I think that's a big fight everyone's wanted for a while. But here's the thing, and we all do expect him to take care of, Akhmadaliev because I don't think Akhmadaliev is the
Mm.
same Akhmadaliev from 2 years ago, though.
I agree, but in a way, has to be careful
He
because,
does.
Timothy Bradley did a really good job. They talked about this on ESPN. By the way, Joe Tessitore, Timothy
The best.
Bradley,
Joe Tess is, I think,
they
one
were
of the
great.
best play-by-play guys,
They
just
were
in
great. It
general.
was by far the best broadcast of the weekend, with respect to Jim Lampley, who you know I love. But that was great. Here's the thing, though. Timothy Bradley did a good job of highlighting, like, sometimes Inoue can have these moments of carelessness defensively. We still think he's pound for pound top.
3.
Yeah, but probably one or two.
It's hard for me to say that. I don't know where to put them. Usyk, Bud, and
Yeah,
Inoue.
it
I
changes.
can't. They're all 1A, B, C.
To me, Usyk became number one after beating Tyson Fury, especially
Yeah.
twice, doing it twice. And it's like, that's the best. That's the best set of victories out of anybody there, I think. But all those three guys should be tied basically because they're that good and that accomplished. And honestly, we're blessed to be in this era where you have three all-time greats at that level. Canelo Alvarez is an all-time great. Like, there are some others. I think Bivol is going to be a Hall of Famer, better BF, etc. But those three are the clear pound for pound top three. The point that I'm getting to is, though, like, he has to be careful. Like, MJ, I don't think he's going to lose his MJ fight, but in a way, and to your point, it's not even just the power potentially translating or not translating to 126 um, when he eventually does do that, but hopefully he doesn't go up too late. And then it's also like taking the punches, because we saw the fight before. Rafael Espinosa is a champion, and I'm not saying he'd beat Inoue because I'm not picking anyone to beat Inoue yet, but that ain't gonna be easy.
The size and length I think would be different, and also Inoue's size would kind of concern me. But Rafael Espinosa, he's like my favorite fighter right now. However, he makes a lot of mistakes. Like he does make a lot of mistakes. So I think
Ramirez dropped him. That's
yeah.
right.
So I think Inoue could have success against him if he was to move up. However, here's the thing: I want to stick with, because I kind of asked you a double question there, and we went to MJ, but let's focus on him moving up,
And then we'll
right?
put up some comments after.
Because I think this is really important.
Yeah.
Do you think his power is going to translate to 126 after what we saw? And is he going to be able to take the power from those guys at 126? Because now I'm having questions. Now I'm like, where does Inoue cap out? Now I'm like, he's been dropped twice and he has been able to come back from it. And you have to be resilient. You have to have those moments as a boxer. And Inoue has done it and won in great fashion. But now I'm like, is he going to cap out at 126? Like, is it the smartest for him to do that? Because I think Inoue's 30 years old. Like, I'm at the point, Brian, where it's like, let him fight it. Let him fight MJ. Let him fight Nakatani in Japan. And then at
32, by the way.
and then at one point I want to get him and Bam. Like
Okay.
if we're talking about just money fights, like big blockbuster fights, which in a way, like we don't even care who he fights against. Like we just want to see him. That's how great he is, right? So that's kind of like who I would like to see him fight. But when I'm thinking about him going up now, I'm like, yo, does he? I don't know if he should go up. I think there's bigger fights to be made.
I saw a quote saying that he would stay at this weight so long as he can continue to make it, which if you're somebody who wants him to move up to 126, that's worrisome just because he's 32 already. And it's like you're kind of running out of time to clean out that division, even though we all think he's good enough and elite enough to do it. The good thing is that here, Nakatani is a bantamweight. So Nakatani has to come up to face him. So I'm not as worried from a power perspective in that fight. I'm just worried because I think Nakatani is really good and he's approaching some pound for pound lists right now. Some people may argue it's a little early, but that dude is a star. Like some people would say, like in terms of popularity, he could get to where Inoue is in due time. He's obviously younger, and Bam, I'm less worried about because 115, he could obviously like jump up here, I think, with no problem, bantamweight, and here is where we're talking about something different. Like I have questions about whether or not we're getting Inoue Bam at all, ever. Inoue Nakatani is the one that I feel like we need now.
I think we'll get Nakatani and Bam at some point.
I probably agree that I definitely agree that that's more likely of more likely than Inoue Bam, but that's speculation, right?
Yeah.
But getting back to the featherweight division, okay, so he beat Stephen Fulton already, and Stephen Fulton wants that fight again. I don't really want to see it again, but whatever.
Maybe in a different weight class. I think Stephen Fulton's look good. I'm a Stephen Fulton fan though, so I'm being totally biased here.
But there's talks about him moving up to fight O'Shaquie Foster at 130,
which is a good fight. But O'Shaquie Foster is not to be slept on.
Great fight. That is a fight where it's like, that's the co-feature of God. What card is that again? Somebody in the comments let me know. That's supposed to be the co-feature of like something big coming down the line. I don't necessarily remember if it's Canelo Crawford, but it's something big. Post-fight show worthy, I'm sure. This is the fight that I want to see at featherweight. Inoue versus Nick Ball. They've went back and forth, not in a mean-spirited way, but in a way like, oh yeah, like we're definitely gonna fight at some point. And logically, he seems like a guy where this makes a ton of sense to fight him, not just because Nick Ball is like 4'11", but because Nick Ball would give like a very entertaining fight. Inoue likes to brawl. I think if he's getting dropped by Ramon Cardenas, I think Nick Ball presents an interesting challenge in that regard because he's going to be in his face all night. And I think it's worth talking about Angelo Leo, who has a title defense coming up in Japan in a few weeks, against his number one ranked contender, Tomoki Kameda. I think if Inoue, because Angelo Leo has fought on ESPN before, has fought in a top ranked card before, he beat Luis Lopez in a sensational knockout. But if Leo loses this fight, and he could, Inoue could just jump up and challenge for this title in Japan if he wants to move up to 126, though I don't think he's going to do it anytime soon. So, yeah, I think there are some names that I probably would go for if I'm Inoue that aren't Rafael Espinoza if he were to go up there. But, first we're going to see Akhmadaliev and go from there. But I would ask you, do you want the Akhmadaliev fight to be his last at 122? Do you think this is like the final test here? Unless Nakatani jumps up or something like that. But do you think this should be his last fight in this weight class otherwise?
I don't think he has anything else to prove at 122 if he takes care of Akhmadaliev. And this is the thing. We've been talking about this Akhmadaliev fight for like 2-3 years. And it's finally happening. Thank God it's finally happening. But Akhmadaliev isn't that same Akhmadaliev that we saw from like 2-3 years ago. So, we're getting this fight at a later time. I just want Inoue in the biggest and best fights. And I want him against Nakatani. And there is a chance that Nakatani could also come up. If Nakatani decides to come up, that's a blockbuster fight. And Inoue should just stay at 122. I don't think he should move up if Nakatani is going to come up for that fight. and that could possibly happen. That's a fight that happens in Japan and is one of the biggest fights, Brian.
Tokyo Dome. Yep.
It would be insane, that fight. So I think there's money to be made. It would be entertaining because you got Inoue, who's been the king, and Nakatani, who's coming up. Like, the storylines are immaculate for that. Here's the thing. If Nakatani doesn't come up, and he doesn't have to, I do think that I think Inoue would want to move up, but I think that's where he caps out, is 126. We've heard all the stupid stuff, and we're getting the fight with, Bud and Canelo, and that was a dream fight at one point. I don't ever think Inoue and Tank is going to happen. It's not going to happen at 130. I just don't see Inoue moving up all the way to 130, and I think he should cap out at 126, Brian. But there are some really good fights at 126 to be made, and there's some really, really tough fights. But I don't know, we've never seen Inoue at 126 before. So there's names at 126 where I'm like, hey, I like Rafael Espinoza. He's young, he gets hit a lot, and he continues to throw, and he's got power. So length, size-wise, it's like, I think him to cap out at 126 would probably be the best.
Let's look at 130, just because I agree. We talked about he could potentially move up to 126, 130, but I think that was more contingent upon him moving up at the time we were talking about this. And now at 32, it doesn't feel like we could even think about 130 yet, because I still think 126 could be a while away, right? Like, at least one, we know we're getting at least one more fight in this division. And presumably, if Nakatani happens after that, that would be, I think, at 122. And Nakatani is having a unification coming up, actually. I just looked up that it was in June. I was like, I knew it was coming up, but forgot when. And it is against Nishida. So they're going to unify those titles. I do wonder, at 130, I'd still like this is where the size starts to become a question, because Oshaki Foster would be tricky in a theoretical. We don't know what the 130 division would look like in a couple of years, but Navarrete versus Inoue, that might be too much size.
Oh my God. And Manuel Navarrete would take a lot of shots too, and just do unconventional stuff and get dropped 3 times. I don't know. It would be ridiculous, but
he fights this weekend, by the way. He fights this weekend, by the way, against Charlie Suarez.
But that size is such a big factor at 130.
Yeah.
But 126, I think, is a good number for Inoue to cap out, and there's really good fights there. I want to get to some comments, Brian, because there's some really good comments in the chat today. So let's start off with our good friend of the show, I am PK13, who says the stoppage of Cardenas was premature, but it didn't change the ultimate outcome of the fight. You know what? He was getting beat down so much, though, I am PK13. I thought there were chances during the fight where they could have stopped the fight before, to be honest with you.
I was scared they were going to do it. And I was like, no, not yet, because he's still throwing enough. But then once it got to the point where he actually got stopped, he wasn't throwing enough at that point.
Yeah, honestly, there were times where it's like, oh my God, it's over. And then all of a sudden he comes back and starts landing some shots. And it's like, how is he alive? You know what I mean? I had no idea how Cardenas was doing that. He's tough as hell, super entertaining. Let's get to Foxy. Also good friend of the show, repping the UK, I believe.
Yes. He was at Chris Eubank and Conor Benn.
The best fight of the year.
Yeah, although these two are probably the two, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. Foxy says, now that's boxing. 2 fighters that want to fight, 2 fighters that want to be the best, and more importantly, a bloody atmosphere. Yeah, we love that. Give us those fights, right? Give us those fights.
Crowd wasn't huge. I think I read the capacity was 8,000 something. Sunday night, weird. Also, not the biggest venue, so they may have sold it out. I'm not sure, but the atmosphere was there. The fans were absolutely into it, and they wanted to. They stood there, Joe Tessitore was pointing out. They didn't leave immediately after the final bell. They wanted to see Inoue. Inoue was tossing T-shirts out of the cannon with the top ranked models. You know what I mean?
Eating cake before he fought. He was just doing whatever he wanted to do, Let Inoue do his thing. Mark says Cinco de Mayo energy gave Cardenas extra mental strength. Mexican pride wouldn't let him give up. I mean, yeah, if I'm a Mexican fan, I'm like, dude, I love Cardenas. He probably fought Inoue the best that we've seen in a while. You have to admit, dude.
ever,
Yeah, like he
ever.
gave it
I've
his all.
It's the only time I've ever thought he might lose this fight. When
There
Neri
was
dropped him, I never had that thought. I legitimately never did because I saw how he came out next round and I was like, he's fine. And he woke and he got up like pretty easily, it felt like. This one, it was because he got rocked, but also his defense kept getting penetrated. And on
yeah.
top of that, the other tough fight that he had was like the first No Needle Donaire fight when he got hurt. But I never felt like he was going to lose that fight. He was still ahead, but it got
Yeah.
pretty close and dicey at points.
For this fight, also the reason why I thought there was a chance that Inoue could get upset, and I was like going into this, I was like, there's no way. But when he got dropped, and then the way Cardenas was eating Inoue shots,
Mhm.
and then also throwing the amount of power he was still throwing with after eating those shots, I was like, this is going to be a tougher task than I thought. And he deserves a lot of credit. He put on a great show. Makeshift 23, who's left some really good comments, so we're going to get to all of them. He says, or she, let us know.
32. Yeah.
Inoue is 31 or 32 years old, and he confirmed that he wants to stop at 126, which would make a lot of sense.
Smart.
Makeshift 23 also says if Inoue were to become undisputed at 126 and win the big name fights to remain undefeated, Nakatani, Bam, Ball, Espinoza, oh my goodness, then there will be a serious discussion about him being an all-time great. I think he's already an all-time great, but if he got those names on his list, like that's mad. That's one of the greatest resumes, I feel like.
I think the distinction Makeshift is probably making is like in the all-time great discussion. But
is
I,
it
I,
D?
I,
Let
I
us know,
think,
Makeshift.
but like he could retire now and be in the Hall of Fame. He's an all-time great already. But I do want to. There's still some fights, like you mentioned. There's still some fights that I want to see. I don't want, like with Terrence Crawford, I think he's an all-time great. However, I do wish there were some guys that he fought that we didn't get to see him fight, like Keith Thurman, Danny Garcia, and like that peak welterweight, like when welterweight was like welterweight in the mid-20s. I mean, it was really welterweight like further back in the day, but you get what I'm saying. We had a really good welterweight division that was popping throughout the 2010s. Especially in
Welterweight's
like the
always
mid
been
2010s.
popping. Well, welterweight's always been popping, like even since in the 90s when we were growing up and stuff like that. I just think
It's just
now it's
not
kind
right
of a
now.
dud. Yeah, it's kind
Yeah.
of a dud right now. Let's quickly get over to TJ because he has 2 comments. He says, "Hey y'all, TJ, thanks for joining us today."
Yes.
TJ also says, "Shushu,
That's
Bruce
right.
Carrington wants to fight Inoue." We have a clip of him saying that on our page.
Mhm.
How do you feel about that, Brian? Because some New York bias there. Do you think Bruce Carrington is ready for Inoue if Inoue moves up?
Admittedly, I'm probably more intrigued now after the Cardenas fight.
Really? Okay.
But I don't think he's gonna win. Again, there's not a single person I'm picking against in a way. The matchup that would give me the most hesitancy would be if he called out Rafael Espinosa tomorrow and it's like, fuck MJ, I'm fighting you instead in September. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, hold on. Hold on.
Yeah.
Ultimately I'd still probably take him, but like I wouldn't take Shushu over him. But Shushu has to get a title first. Like in a way is undisputed. In a way is not, like he's only been fighting title fights for years. You're not getting into the discussion without a title. So Shushu has to get a title and he's top ranked. So the WBO title would have to be it. And you tell me if you think he's going to beat Rafael Espinosa, because I'm not sure.
I don't know that and I love Rafael Espinosa, you guys. He's one of my favorite fighters right now, but never seen Inoue in that weight class. And I would like to have Inoue have a tune-up at 126 and then fight someone really big.